So you are a new knitter and you are just about to start with your very first sweater when you see this. You are immediately intimidated, but you proceed anyway and you knit up something that looks a bit like this. Don't be discouraged, we've all been there. So today I will be giving you some advice on how to improve your ribbing, and I will also be showing you 6 different types of ribbing that you can do throughout your projects. So ribbing usually creates a very stretchy fabric, which is mostly used for the cuffs of your sleeve or necklines, and also because ribbing doesn't actually roll up the way stockinette stitch does, it's a perfect stitch for stuff like beanies or gloves or even scarves. It's also mostly knit up using a smaller needle size than you would use for the rest of your project, because this also creates a bit of a cinching in effect if that is what you would prefer, but you can of course do it with a bigger needle size as well, which will give another effect. So ribbing is usually just made alternating your knit and purl stitches, and that's just about it. So the first 5 stitches I'm going to be showing you today is just knit and purl alternating in different ways, and the last one is the only one that has a little bit of a trick to it, so let's get started. So the very first type of ribbing is a standard 1x1 rib, and this is probably the most common form of rib that you will see, that is usually used for sweaters and necklines. So if you understand this first one, you will be able to do basically all of them. I will also be showing you the diagram version of how to do these stitches, because I personally sometimes find the diagram just a little bit better to understand than the written instructions. But keep in mind that if you are working this in the round, that your pattern throughout will just look the same. Whereas when you knit it flat, which will be the diagram that I will be showing, that your first row would be different than your second row. So I will keep a key somewhere for you. So now is also a good time to remember that you have a wrong side and also a right side when knitting flat. So I'll be using 4.5mm needles for this, and I just have some leftover yarn as well. I believe this is Darper James or something. Not that the yarn that you will use for this will really matter much. So you're going to start off with a slip knot. Then you need a multiple of 2 stitches. So I'm just going to use the long tail cast on for this, just because I find it a bit more stretchy. So if you don't know how to do this one, you just take your fingers, split the 2, make sure your working yarn is the one in the back and your short one is in the front. So again, just split your yarns, pull it down, and then just underneath the thumb over the other finger. Of course, there's an easier way to do this one as well. It just makes your very first row quite a bit harder to do. And with this one, you just take your working yarn, take your thumb, and then you just cross them and underneath and let it go. I believe this is just called the standard back loop cast on. But like I said, I'm going to just use the other one. So for this, we will need stitches in multiples of 2. So I will be using 12. Okay, so your stitches are casted on. So turn your work. Now we start with a knit one. So it's just into that front loop. Take your yarn over. The next one is a purl. So now you just bring that yarn to the front and again into that same loop in the front and through. And then again a knit. So take your yarn to the back, knit one, and then again to the front and purl one. And this is your pattern that you just continue until you reach the end. Okay, so if you did 12 stitches like I did, you will end on a purl stitch. And so the first piece of advice I can give you on how to improve your ribbing is this last stitch. Your edge stitches usually are a bit more lumpy and a bit more loose than the rest. So what you want to do with this very last stitch is just try to stretch it out as little as possible. So instead of having it in the back of the needle and knitting it like that, try to keep it at the tips and try to keep that stitch a bit more tensioned than the rest of your stitches. So pull your yarn just a bit more for that last one. So that's your first row. So now we are going to turn our work. So what you have to remember now is that you need to knit into your knit stitches and to purl into your purl stitches. So after turning your work, what you will realize now is we just ended on a purl stitch. You can see that with the bump. And now we are starting with a knit stitch because these two work opposite each other basically. So now, again, with your edge stitch, make sure that you just use the very tip of your needle and knit one. Then the next one you can see has a bump. So that is a purl stitch. Try to keep your tension as even as possible. And then again a knit, purl, and you just keep on going until the end of your row. And your last stitch will once again be a purl stitch. So again, at the tip of your needle, yarn nice and tight, and there you go. So now you will be able to see kind of what it's starting to look like, where you have your knit stitches that kind of looks like this little V, and then in between you have these bumps. And then again, if you turn it around, it will be the exact opposite. So where that first stitch is a knit stitch, in the back it will be a purl stitch with a bump. So if you're knitting in the round, your pattern will just stay knit one, purl one throughout the whole piece. Whereas, as you just saw, when you work flat, you actually alternate your stitches the whole time. So just keep that in mind every time you do this one. So the next two stitches are the exact same, except you just have a bit more knits or a bit more purls. So the double rib knit stitch is worked in multiples of 4, whereas the one we just did is multiples of 2. So the double rib, you actually knit 2 stitches and then you purl 2 stitches. Then you knit 2 stitches and you purl 2 stitches. And that is all that there is to it. It is a very, very nice alternative also for the standard 1x1 rib if you want a bit of a different look, or maybe you want to make a hat or something, or you just don't like the look of the 1x1 rib. So for the double rib stitch, I just cast on 12 stitches. And now we are going to start by knitting 2. And then purl 2. And then again knit 2. And purl 2. And if you cast it on 12 stitches like I did, your last 2 stitches will be purl. And that is your first row. Then you turn your work and you will once again see your 2 first stitches are knit stitches and these 2 are purl stitches. So we start off by knitting the first 2 and purling the next 2. So as you can see, it's just a little bit different than that first one. We have 2 purl stitches followed by 2 knit stitches, 2 purl and 2 knit. The next one is a 2x1 rib. So for this one, you need stitches in multiples of 3. And you have 2 purl stitches on either side of 1 knit stitch. For the 2x1 rib, we need multiples of 3 stitches, so I cast it on 15. So now we are going to start with a knit one. Followed by 2 purls. And then again a knit one and 2 purls. Again knit one and 2 purls. If you also cast on 15 stitches, your last 2 stitches will be purls. And that is your first row. Turn your work. So again, now you can see we have 2 V's and 1 bump. And 2 V's and 1 bump. 2 V's and 1 bump. So now this is so easy to just follow along with. You just knit the first 2. And purl the third one. And and then again knit 2, and purl. And if you ever lose your place or you're not sure, again, just check which stitch is next. So that is a V and a V, so it's 2 knits. And again, if you have the same amount of stitches as me, your last stitch will be a purl. This is also so far the only stitch that has a wrong side and a right side, because you want your right side to have 1 knit stitch with 2 purl stitches on either side. And that is your 2x1 rib. So this next one is more just a different technique in ribbing than it really is a rib stitch all on its own. So you can do this one with your 1x1 rib, your double rib, and with your 2x1 rib. So this is called the twisted rib stitch. So the only difference is, instead of knitting into the front loops like we have been doing this whole time, we are working into the back loops. So I casted on 12 stitches. I am going to show you this with just the standard 1x1 rib, but as I've mentioned, you can use this technique with your double rib and your 2x1 rib as well. So this whole time we have been working into this front stitch, that one. So the only difference is now we are going to be working into the back one. So instead of your front, go in the back and knit 1. And the same with the purl as well. So instead of going in through that stitch in the front, we want that back loop. And again, knit into the back loop and purl into the back loop. And you just continue this until the end of your row. If you cast it on the same amount of stitches as me, you will end with a purl stitch. Also keep your tension in mind for this one, because I definitely cast it on way too tightly. And there you go, that is the twisted rib stitch. Again, alternating between a purl and a knit, but as you can see, your V is a little bit different now, where this loop is kind of over that loop and they're not going in together, so it just looks a little bit different. Do keep in mind that the twisted rib stitch is not as elastic as the standard types of ribbing, so just keep that in mind when you use them for cuffs or something. They might be a bit better to use on something like a scarf. Also, if you are still struggling with your ribbing not coming out as neat as you would like, try sizing down your needles even more. Be careful to do it too much, because it can kind of just influence your look at the end of the day, where your ribbing will just be too cinched in and it will be maybe a bit uncomfortable unless that's what you're going for, but try to size down your needles even more, and maybe that will also help your tension. So the next one is the mistake rib, and this is where the diagram is definitely going to help you a lot more than the written instructions. So with this one, again, we will have one knit stitch that has two different stitches on each side of it, but it's not quite the same as the 2x1 rib. So this one requires a multiple of 4 stitches plus 1. So I'm going to be using 4, 8, 12 stitches plus 1, so that is 13. So for this one, we are once again going to start out by knitting 1. Then we knit 1 again. Then we purl 1. Then we knit 2. Then knit 1 more. So again, with this one, it is beneficial to just look at the diagram because the written instructions are a little bit confusing, but just think of it this way, that you have 1 purl and you have 3 knit stitches in between. So the pattern will tell you to knit 1, purl 1, and knit 2, and just repeat that section. So again, 1 purl and 3 knit stitches. 1, 2, 3, and then again 1 purl, and then you're going to end with 2 knit stitches. And that is your first row. So this is also the first type of ribbing that we cannot actually follow what we did in the previous row. So we cannot actually purl 2, knit 1, purl 3, knit 1 now, because then that will just be a knit 1, purl 3 rib, if you understand what I'm trying to explain to you. So instead of a 2x1 or a 1x1, this will just be a 1x3 rib. So this one is just a little bit different than that. So now we have a purl and 3 knits. It's quite hard to actually explain this one, so again, just refer to the diagram. So you will see we have 1 knit stitch that will be prominent throughout this pattern, and then the 2 stitches on either side of it will just look a bit different. So we have a purl, knit 3, now it's again a purl, and a knit 3. And again, there you will see our prominent knit stitch. So every 4th stitch will be a knit stitch. I'm just going to do an extra row for this one, just so you can see the pattern a bit more clearly. So the last stitch for today is also a very, very, very popular one, because this is the exact stitch for the fisherman's sweater. So this one is actually a very fun one to do, and you don't have to purl at all, and it still gives you that beautiful ribbed effect. So for this one, we will need a multiple of 2 stitches plus 3. So I will be using 2, 4, 6, 8 plus 3 stitches, so that's 11. So for this stitch, your very first row is just a knit row. So just go ahead and just knit that very first row. So for row 2, you will start with a knit 1. Then instead of purling, you are actually going to knit into the bottom of that next stitch. So you see that little hole it makes right beneath the next stitch. You are going to knit into that hole. Pull it through and just let that stitch go. Then you knit 1, then again knit 1 below. So just locate that bottom stitch and knit into it. Knit 1 and knit 1 below, and just repeat this until you reach your last stitch. And your last stitch will always be a knit. And you will immediately see we have these double bumps starting to form. So for row 3, you will once again start with a knit, then knit 1 again, and then knit 1 below. Then knit 1, knit 1 below, knit 1, knit 1 below, and just do this until you reach your last 2 stitches. So for row 3, your last 2 stitches will be knit stitches. 1 and 2. There you have row 3. So now you just repeat row 2 and 3 until you are done. There we go, everyone. Now you have 6 different types of ribbing in your pocket for your knitting. Ribbing is a very versatile and a very commonly used stitch, so you will most likely always come across ribbing in any pattern. So it is quite important to try and perfect or master your ribbing. And just to give you a quick recap on how you can do that is make sure your edge stitches are nice and tight. Practice your tension. That is probably the most important way and the easiest way to really improve your ribbing is just to practice. Try sizing down your needles even more to try and even out your tension. There's also this awesome video by Nimble Needles, I believe, and he also gives a very in-depth explanation on how you can really improve your ribbing. But thank you guys so much for watching today. Please do consider to subscribe, give the video a like if you enjoyed it or if you learned something new. Let me know in the comments if there is something else that you would like to learn or a tutorial you would like. I really enjoy doing these every so often, so let me know and I will see you in the next one.